I really want to make sure you understand the difference between 1 foot jumping and 2 foot jumping in order of what I think is most important to understand. First off is practice. So the number one difference I find between 1 foot jumpers and 2 foot jumpers is that 1 foot jumpers have practiced 1 foot jumping more, 2 foot jumpers have practiced 2 foot jumping more. I have 2 examples to illustrate this. I have tested healthy males who can jump up to 13 inches higher off one leg when running 1 foot, guys who are 1 foot jumpers, versus the other leg when running 1 foot. So if they can have a 13-inch difference in the same body, then clearly it's not only genetics determining if you can do 1 foot or 2 foot jumping, because here you're looking at incredible off one leg, horrible on the other, because they've practiced that one leg over and over and over. One thing it's doing is it's simply making you more coordinated for it. How far can you throw a football with one arm versus the other? There's a coordination factor, which is a huge deal, but it also has a physiological adaptation effect, meaning every time you're doing intense 1 foot jumping, you're adapting certain muscles for 1 foot jumping. So these two factors combined are why one person could jump so much higher on one leg than the other. So same thing for 2 foot. 2 foot, a lot of technique comes into it, and guys who have not practiced 2 foot may have the potential for 2 foot. So far, I have not seen any cases of someone who just can't jump off 1 foot or can't jump off 2 feet if they simply practice it and know what they're doing in practicing it. Now, going further than that, there are then some deeper factors, which again, you don't have to know about, but if you want to know more and more about it, here's the next factors. 1 foot jumping, if they do studies and just measure the force, it is about twice as much force through your ankle. So you very well may have someone with plenty of potential to jump high off 1 foot, but they just can't harness it. So their hips and their knees may be strong enough for a 40-inch vertical off 1 foot, but their ankle just can't handle the force. You're only as strong as your weakest link when it comes to a 1 foot jump. So someone who thinks they can't jump off 1 foot, they very well may have tons of potential, and they just need much, much stronger calves and tibialis. But again, that's just the muscle side. Okay, there's also the tendon side. So I've never seen a case of not being able to transform a 1 foot jump. That doesn't mean that after a lifetime of being a 2 foot jumper, that in 1 month you're going to become a great 1 foot jumper. But in a relatively short amount of time, I've never seen a case where I can't improve someone's 1 foot jump markedly by getting those ankles really strong and by working them on proper things like bounding. And remember, just the practice alone has tons of elasticity effect. Then going even further is eccentric knee flexion strength. So you can think the way down on a Nordic. The way up is a great test of explosiveness. The way down is an incredible test for 1 foot jumping. So the way down, if you're weak eccentrically in your knee flexion, one of two things is going to happen. One is your leg, you're going to get kind of a dead leg where you're unable to keep pulling the ground, and so you're trying to go only upward and you're not able to pull the ground, and it just sort of stunts your jump. Guys in sports like basketball have often felt this. You end up on a fast break, you go to dunk off 1 foot, and it's like you just get this like power outage. So that is simply because you were not strong enough. Your leg is extending, and it hits the heel, hits the floor, and it wasn't able to keep pulling. It wasn't able to handle that, so it straightened without being able to apply force. So it's straightening, right heel hits the floor, boom, and then boop, it was too strong. It broke you. Your eccentric strength couldn't handle it. So that could happen. The other option is that you don't let it break you that way. You keep it bent, but you weren't able to pull, so now you put all this force forward into your knee, which is not actually how you jump off 1 foot. You don't jump off 1 foot by pushing backwards with your knee. And so what happens if you let it bend now too much, since you couldn't handle the force on the hamstring and you shift over too much to the quad, hence why a lot of people will say, earlier in my career, I could dunk off 1 foot. Then as I went, I had to switch to being a 2 foot jumper because it hurt my knee too much. That doesn't necessarily mean, of course, if the quads were strong enough to a certain extent, however much force is going into the quad, you could just have quads strong enough and not hurt. Your jump wouldn't be as high as it could be, but you wouldn't hurt. However, for the guy whose quads are not insanely strong, now they're putting too much on the quads, now there's knee pain, but the whole thing could have been prevented if they were working the way down on Nordics and getting really, really strong on that. The last thing to leave you with here is Stefan Holm. You can look this guy up. He goes against the two biggest things that people say, oh, you're a 1 foot jumper because you have long legs and long Achilles tendons. Well, this guy had short Achilles tendons and short legs, and he won a gold medal in the high jump by jumping higher off one leg than anyone on earth. That is my point. But if you look at his training, he was mastering bounding and different one-leg jumping, and he was determined. He was also, interestingly enough, he was maybe the only high jumper of his generation who had a beautiful, deep squat. Who would have thought that a full deep squat and this guy would be winning the high jump? Wouldn't you think that going so far down wouldn't be sport specific for a high jump? Well, it just goes to show that how you train and stretch does not have to look identical to what you're doing in your actual sport. By him doing deep squats, his legs and glutes, his quads and glutes could handle probably more than other high jumpers, so he could put more force in. And from all his training, clearly his ankles, he worked the heck out of his hamstrings, and from all that jumping alone, he had all this. He had all of that, and even though he didn't have the genetics for it, was told that his genetics were not possible to be a good high jumper, still won a gold medal. So I think that's very important to understand that regardless of what anyone's telling you, anyone who tells you that your genetics are not built for 1 foot, Stefan Holm, you have no excuses. The last little thing I'll give you in terms of how all this relates to our programming, we're trying to get everyone as strong at eccentric knee flexion because that protects your knee ligaments. That is going to make you even, the increased hamstring strength is even going to improve your penultimate step for 2 foot jumping. So this is something we're going to work. This is going to make you run faster. We don't try to leave holes. I'm not trying to make someone a 1 foot or a 2 foot jumper. A really good athlete, the Michael Jordans of the world, the Russell Westbrooks of the world, they can do both, and that's why they can also run fast. Someone could get just good at 1 foot or just good at 2 foot by leaving holes in their training, but these guys are going to be at high risk of injury, and they're simply not going to be as good of athletes. And even what they could do, so even your best 2 foot jumper, by improving these very things to improve 1 foot, now having stronger ankles, because I've seen guys who can do 2 foot jumping, but they go to do 1 foot, oh, I can't do that because I get shin splints. Well, by actually getting everything around your ankle stronger, that is going to add even a little bit more to your 2 foot. So we're not trying to leave holes in your training. And then the last little thing here is you will notice that when we work on technique in the beginning stages, we only work on the technique of your 2 foot jump. And that's because the technique of 1 foot jump is actually a lot less about technique. And what I mean by that is if you took an Olympic long jumper, and if you just took someone off the street, and you had them both go run and do a 1 foot jump, the patterns would actually look pretty similar. But if you took a world-class dunker and someone off the street and had them do a 2 foot jump, the entire pattern would look different. I mean, 2 foot has like its own strategy. So mastering that penultimate step in the base stage is very important. And even if you are a super good 2 foot jumper, it's super rare to have a penultimate step that looks identical on each side. And that's actually key for your leg strength, your knee health, and your elasticity between patellar and Achilles. So in our training, we are going to naturally get good at 1 foot through incredible ankle strengthening, eccentric knee flexion, and by working 2 full approach jumps off 1 foot. But you're going to get more out of that, out of the bounding itself and the approach jumps off 1 foot, than trying to come up and overcomplicate the process of 1 foot jumping with some 1 foot jumping drill. It doesn't even mean we couldn't make one up, but from looking at this and working with real athletes over and over and over and over, for 2 foot, we really do need, a lot of people will need to work on this penultimate drill. Whereas for 1 foot, we have not found the need to work on a 1 foot drill when you're mastering your bounding, your ankle strengthening, your eccentric knee flexion, and then actually doing full approach jumps, which is where you really get into some minute details that actually can help you jump higher off 1 foot, which will be coached by Connor watching your form. So that's where we come in with the technique training. So I hope this helped you. 1 foot versus 2 foot. Get your mind right and understand that right off the bat, whichever one has been practiced the most. Oh, and I meant to tell you, I've met 2 twin brothers who, for whatever reason, one of them ended up choosing 1 foot and one of them chose 2 foot, and they both suck at the other one, and they're literally identical twins. So I already gave you the example of guys jumping higher off one side than the other. Same with 2 foot. There's guys who jump way different between a right left and a left right. And if you look down, way down at the bottom, Stephen Holm, basically we have enough evidence and proof that genetics do not have to hold you back from being great at both, and being great at both is going to mean that you're being the best all-around athlete you can be.